of hand, anyone have seen this or have used this before? Or if you know what this is? Okay, I'm surprised that there is any hands. So we have 1, 2, 3, 3 people. Cool. So this is the Yahoo UI library. It's something that's built in the 2000s. It's launched. So this is a version during 2008. And what this is really our typical design system. But this has been there for over 20 years, I think. Although the style is not the best, but then from this you can see a lot of familiar stuff that we have today. Stuff like buttons, stuff like guidelines on how do we pick colors and etc. So it's not something new, and the message that I want to bring here is that design system is there since very early on. And in fact, I think one of the origin of design system is really frameworks, the idea of frameworks. And this is an idea from engineering where the goal is really to build something that's reusable. So then we can solve the problem of saving people time. So then they don't need to reinvent the wheel every time when they're building code. Of course, it's also on the styling side as well to help with consistency. But again, this is something that we have seen for a very long time. So you see stuff like jQuery, Bootstrap, material design. It's been there since more than 10 years. Well, I have links in my slide. Feel free to check it out after, but I won't go over those. And of course, this is not only an engineering thing. It's also something that we see in other places as well. So for example, in industrial design, so in industrial design, we have this thing called design language, where you would see that, for example, Apple, they have this Snow White design language that's there. And this is during the 1984. And what this is really that Apple has built in partnership with other agencies, a design language to shape and design their computers. I think it's a set of 7 computers. But what you see is a white kind of color. They call it fog color, and also these strips you see on the machine. They serve not only of an aesthetic purpose. It looks cool for sure, but then it's also functional in a sense where when you look at it, first of all, you would see that it looks smaller than it is for the computer, but also it's functional in the sense where it's the ventilation. So for each of these suite of Apple computers, this ventilation is designed the same way because of this design language. So the message here is really that design system is not only a product design thing. It's been there not only for industrial design, right? Automobile design, you see those design language as well. So that's, I think we borrow a lot of those concepts from other disciplines as well. And coming back to product design, just to give a little definition here of what I think we are working in. This is not the definite answer, but this is what I think. For design system, I think it serves a wider audience where it's about the guidelines, it's about the design language, it's about how things should look like, and also how we design products. So it's your typical material design, et cetera, design system. Those we see online, I think it's design system. I hear a lot about a term called design library as well. And to me, what I think that is really the operational stuff. So the assets that we use in Figma, those we call design library. And then we have design ops as well. I think it's getting more confusing for some, especially for beginners. But design ops in one sentence is really the ways of working. So how designers, how people work together to create design. So it's about the process, it's about the tools and etc. So that's design ops. Well, for me to continue, any questions so far? If not, then I continue. So here I will share a little bit about the kind of general journey of design system development that I've seen from developing early on app and also web, but also bigger products as well. So this journey to me is of a 5-step journey. It's not, it's just only my thinking, right? But in a lot of design team, we begin with a design team of one. So there is one designer or even just one developer making the design. So in that case, when there is not much design system after all, it's all in the brain, and it really depends on the person. So everything is in your mind. So I would say like, Samuel, what's the button? And Samuel will think, oh, actually that button would, in his mind, be a specific blue in color. So that's the very first stage of most of the products that I've seen. And then we have the second stage. And the second stage is really that we have some more time. As one designer, we have some more time and we want to make it better, and we try to do it right. And this is the point where we start to look for existing solutions. So material design, we look at how others does it, and we try to set up something that can work for our team. But the problem is that we try to over-create stuff. So we have a lot of buttons at this stage that we might not need for a long while. And after that period, the problem comes to be more of a problem where the team is growing, the product is growing, but the design system is not growing. And as a result, we have a lot of things like people, those bastards, detaching the instances. And then we also have a design system where it's not keeping up with the growth of the products. New joiners, for example, in the team, they don't know about design system, and therefore they would just create whatever they have in mind. So that create not only a problem for design, but also in terms of the whole business, because we are then spending extra time to build stuff that we have already done. And of course, the app looks inconsistent. And then after that kind of mess, what we have next is really a basic system. That stage is really when people try to work together. They work together and they try to really think in terms of a team, how we can build a system better together. And from that point onward, it's more of a continuous effort where, for example, every 2 weeks, we would come together to work on this design system to see, oh, actually, this week, we have seen a new kind of component that we have to address, and therefore we should continue to grow it. So that's kind of the fourth stage. And I think the North Star here is really that we can build a design system for the team where it's self-sustaining. It's never an effort where it worked only for one person. It can only sustain if it is something that is used by the team and it is managed together by the team. So that's kind of the North Star there. And I think the reason why I want to share this stage that I've seen is really because I think for starters especially, it can be very messy of a process. And if you are the only one who in a team who is trying to build the system, you can get lost. And therefore, I think one important thing that I hope that I would have known before is that I know where am I in this process. So then at least I see that, okay, I might not be able to create that, but then at least I can create something useful for the team at the beginning. So I think that's really important. Okay, enough of the experience sharing. A note about how you can get started on design system. And I know that the word design and system, it's very complicated, but it's not that hard really. It's only 3 steps. First, you make things reusable. No matter if it is colors, icons, if it is components, just make it reusable. Second thing you do, you document them well. Document them so that people can understand what you're trying to build there. And then third, and the most important part, is to get feedback from your team. And if you do these 3 steps, I think you will have a great design system. really. And that's really what I do every day. Repeat. If I'm to be more specific on what you can think about when you're starting out or when you're trying to think about design system is really these. So you should think about file structure, how you structure your design files in a way where it's organized and in a way where it's understandable. You should think about the grid and layout for your design. So what I mean by that is really if you're designing mobile, have a mobile grid, and if you're designing web, then make it responsive. Of course, then you should also think about typography, colors, icons, and components. And if you cover all those, I think you will have a solid foundation in starting. And well, to be great at these things, it takes a lot of time for sure. I think no single person can master everything, but if I'm to share some knowledge on how we can improve on that, then it's really first master your design foundation, and what I mean by that is really your graphic design skills. So you should understand color theory, you should understand typography for sure, and then also proportion, and especially if you're a product designer, understand proportion in the context of the device you're doing. You don't want to have super huge stuff or super small stuff on a wide screen, for instance. So design foundation. And this is debatable, but I think for the second part, it's really to understand tech. If you're designing in mobile, you for sure should know more about iOS and Android. And if you're designing in web, then I think having a basic understanding in HTML, CSS would help you a lot as a designer when you're creating things. And finally, accessibility. I think we always talk about that, but what I mean by that is really, first, most important, color contrast. Make sure you understand that. And then secondly, it's about the device-specific accessibility features. So take an example for iOS. I think it would be great if you know about voiceover, how people can control your app with these assistive technologies. Well, I put some links here. Just click on them and you will find resources to know more about these. Well, before I go on, any thinking or thoughts? Cool. Okay, so some tips. I think this tips can be applicable not only for design system people, but also for designers. So I have 3 tips. First is design hygiene. I think that as a designer, it will be very important for you to have a clear structure in your file. So there are 2 purposes to this. First, it's because when you have a clear structure and clear naming system, that means that you're very clear in the hierarchy of your design. So that's first. And then the second is also about collaboration. If you come into the file seeing that it's so organized, as a designer working with you, I will be very happy. And if it is frame 365, then I will not be happy and I don't know how I can help you and I don't know how I can comment. So I think that's very important. Second, it's also design hygiene, but then I'm speaking more about specifically Figma. So use frames and auto layout correctly. I've seen people who do auto layout everything, and I think it's not the way to go. You should use it responsibly, And take an example, right? It should not be that complicated in a sense where, well, in this layout, we have a header, we have a card section, we have a list. Each of this group into a frame. And this is really how I would structure a file, and I don't think there's too much complexity into this. And if you keep it simple, people would be able to understand this and reuse this very quickly. Okay, second tip is components. Again, going more technical. Of how we use components. And I'm not sure if everyone knows, but then we have some new features in Figma where we apart from variance, right, we have these other properties as well. And to me, right, I think you should understand how what each of them are. And a quick introduction is that when I create variants, I would use it for states. So for this, for example, I would use variants for error state, and that's the only variant I would create. For Boolean stuff, I would use it to show and hide stuff. I can't show it here because it's a presentation, but Boolean is really to show and hide labels. So label and supporting text is show and hide, and then instant swap would be stuff like icons, and text is really to define what you have in the component. Well, feel free to talk to me later if you want to dig deeper into this. And secondly, it's about documentation. I think the three things that you should cover in your documentation is this. What the component is, give a brief description, talk about the specs, so padding, spacing, how it should react, and finally, when and how to use a component with examples. I think if you cover those in documentation, it will help a lot for people. And finally, and I think this is my last tip, is to keep it simple. I know there is a lot of talks about design tokens, and it's, at least for me, it's rather hard of a concept to get at first. And I think you don't really need to master design tokens in the beginning, especially when your product is new. If you cover the basics that I just talked about early on in the presentation, I think you should have a good foundation, even without design tokens. So you don't have to give yourself a hard time, even if you don't know this. Make sure, again, those three steps, right? Make things reusable, document them, and then get feedback. If you can do that, I think it's already good. So yeah, that's it. Really, again, when you're confused in your design system journey or when you're designing, know which stage you're at when you're creating that. Then it will help you navigate your journey towards that. I talked about also areas to consider. That 3-step, again, make things reusable, et cetera, and then, well, finally some tips on the technical stuff. Feel free to have a chat, but again, design is something that's fun, so you don't have to follow what I say. Don't listen to me. Just try to break things, and yeah, go out there and break things. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Actually, I forgot to do one thing first. I want to show a hands, like how many of you create design system? Anyone? Okay. How many of you? How many of you use the design system? So that our guest speaker know. Okay. You also use? Yeah, everyone. Those creators also use. So I think that's a very solid 101 on design system. So after knowing what design system is really about, it's time to know about the how and why behind design system.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. It has been a long while since I talked to such a big crowd, so I'm a little bit nervous. I'm Joanne. I'm from Seek, and I'm the head of design practices. I'm working here for quite a long years already. I think it's my 6th years already. So I've been in a distributed teams working as a senior visual designer when I first joined, to nowadays I become more like a head of all the practices within Seek. So we work more like a centralized team, and design system is one of the team that I'm actually looking after at. So today, what I want to bring up is, I saw in the Slido and also the questions that people submit, you want to understand how do you get buy-in from the business. And I think there's no doubt that everyone understands design system is something that we used in order to provide a better design efficiency, it saves time, it creates better consistency in the experience, yada, yada, yada. Like, these are all the things that we know, but how do you actually translate it into business language? what does the business actually cares about. So Theo and I will be talking about this type of things. And I think the first one is quite obvious that everyone would say it is more like a cost and time saving tool that help us to deliver design at speed. But in the way that I would frame it to the business stakeholders is I would say it actually helps us to solve the real problems. So imagine a world that we do not have design system. Everyone is actually doing a lot of things in documentations. We are doing a lot of duplicated work on recreating components. Things may start to get inconsistent. You are trying to make use of like your time in doing things that's really duplicate in a duplicate manner. So when you talk about this to the business, they may not truly understand, it may not actually inspire them to use design system. So what you can do is actually you would say that a design system is helping us to save time to solve the real problems by increasing the team's capacity in doing things like user research or spending your time on doing any creative work to help differentiate your products and your brand. Because I think there's also two sides, right? On one side, you're helping your team to save time to create efficiency. What the business matter is, what are this time actually being spent? I think it's really good examples that you can spend more time on user research and really understanding the problems on your users. You can spend the time in doing testing with your customers. You can also spend time on doing all these type of creative innovation instead of doing duplicated works, working on documentations, making sure that you're able to transfer your design to your developers in a really sophisticated specification format, right? So this is the first tip. And the second one is really about working in an agile environment. Can you show me a hands how many of you are actually working in an agile environment in your current company? Cool. So how many of you are still doing design hands-off to your developers? Yeah, so even ourselves. So the one thing that we really advocate as a design system team is foster the collaboration between designers and the developers. So what I'm saying is design system is giving us a common language that we can speak to developers. Instead of calling it a blue button, we can call it more like it is our call to action buttons. Can you use the primary buttons? The reason why we want to have this language is because like things will change. Your brand might change, your colors may change in time. So all these type of variables, it will be changed, and it very easily can create a really inconsistent way of communications between teams. So a lot of things might be done wrongly. Instead, if we have a common language on how we call these components, people doesn't have to worry what colors the button is. They just have to think about what is the components that we're using in a specific situation. So it actually fosters collaboration between designers and also developers. So while Figma is actually a really great tool that we can use to create components, helping people to build a library for design system, I would also encourage teams. I think in not all scenarios, in some scenarios when you are doing product like iterations or when you are doing a feature improvement, do work with your developers. Like just use the design system, work with them on browser. The good things that you're working on things on browser is you will be able to create prototype that is responsive. You can create prototypes that as if what your customer will eventually see. So building things on browser will actually save you a lot of time on recreating like art files on Figma or in other like type of software, but you're actually seeing the result immediately in the browser. So these will be the things that really help foster the collaboration between design and also developers. And I feel like sometimes it's also some kind of educations that we can give it back to the engineers, because not everyone appreciate or understand like beautiful design. So through this process, you can also help build out like people appreciation to the design work that you're doing by really pairing with them and working things in browser. And the next one is something that I feel really like personally, like I feel really proud of is having a design system. You can deliver things and you can fast track the delivery of design improvement or evolution at scale. So why I'm saying this is if you're aware, if somebody has used JobsDB in the past, you know that our branding has changed in the past years. We know that our branding has been stagnant for a while, and this is one of the reasons there's a business objective that we want to refresh our brand. If not because of design system, we will not be able to deliver this objective so quickly. So it is one of the objectives that we make use of design system, that we can make all these changes in the system base. And what we are requiring for the teams is they just have to update their design system versioning. So all the changes will be applied to the product experience without disturbing the squads or the distributed teams in recreating all these things like one by one. We do have a centralized system that helping people to like create a better UI, like to refresh the brand while they're also working on other features and also solving other problems. So it is something that is really great about design system that you can really deliver things at scale. And I think overall in the tip number 2 is we want to show the value of design consistency because we always talked about design consistency. We want things to be consistent, but like, why is this so important? So I think it's also something that we also like as a practitioner, we want to educate the stakeholders, even though they may not speak the design language. I feel like every one of us can be somebody who advocates and educates the stakeholders to understand the value of design. So cohesive experience definitely build trust and loyalty is some of the things that we always talked about within the design team. It might sounds very far away about trust and loyalty, like how do a consistent design could build this up? So you have to think about like people coming into your product or your brand, they're not only using your brand. In most of the time, they're using a lot of other brands. They're not comparing you with the competitors, but they're comparing you with everybody else, the global players, apps or products that people use every day. So with all these different type of standards that's set up, especially if you notice that in COVID time, we rely on a lot of digital products. People expectation in terms of how great a product is, the standards has been getting higher and higher because they're not comparing you with your competitors. They're comparing you with brands like Facebook, brands like Spotify that people use every day. So if you have a consistent design, it first helps people to reduce a lot of cognitive load. They do not have to relearn your brand. If you are using design systems smart enough, you're putting your brand identity into the systems, people start to recognize your brand. So in long term, it's really help us to reduce a lot of friction and bounce rate because people don't have to spend more like brain effort in order to get familiar with the experience. So it is one of the beauty that why we care so much about design consistency. And the next one is when you have the design system set up, you can also start thinking about how can you make use of the design system to like basically put in a lot of best practices. Technology will change every time, right? Like it changes from years to years. There will be new things coming up. I think 5 years ago, no one actually talking about dark mode. But right now it is more like one of the things that people are looking at in order to have some sort of flexibility to customize their product. So an example is here that we show is our Seek apps. We are not requiring designers to rethink about how to convert the design into a dark mode. Instead, every decision has been made in the design system already. So it means whenever people are like, if they're creating things in light mode, let's say, it's already automatically connected to a colors that equivalents in a dark mode. So it helps them to save a lot of time in making these decisions, but at the same time, we're actually shipping products, like basically building it once, but we ship it twice. Accessibility could be also something that we play really a strong role in building a design system because these are the decisions that we can make in a centralized design system while it benefits everyone when they are using the system itself. So a lot of this kind of like specialized knowledge, it can be built within the centralized team, and the other teams like people in the squads or distributed teams, they can really focus on solving the user problems, spending the time in doing user research or spending the time in understanding like the business need and priority rather than looking into all these technical issues. So there's quite a lot of good things that the design system can deliver, and hopefully it gives you some ideas on how to communicate back to the business. I'll just pause here to see anyone have any questions. Good. Yes, I think so. Is it? Yeah, it is recorded. It will be. Yep. Yeah, don't worry. Don't worry.
I do have one question though, is that, and it was when you were talking about working agile with the developers. So if you're creating a design system, and this is the whole panel, is that, you know, if you're creating a design system in Figma, and you want the developers to also be able to, what platform do you use? That's something that we're struggling with at the moment.
Yeah, it depends on the platform that you're working in. For iOS and Android, for example, there is a lot of different plugins that you can use to export directly your Figma styles and icons and typography, etc., to a set of code that can be reused on native iOS and Android. I think the plugin is called Figma Export. You can look that up. And then for web, there is also something similar, but I don't have the name for that. But essentially, if you, based on the platform that you're doing, you can find some plugins that can export directly.
Yeah, sorry, maybe I can add something on top of what Kelvin had just mentioned. I think regardless of the platform, the most important thing is really connect with your developers to talk through the actual requirement on that component, because we're not talking about just delivering a journey. Hey, this is a screen, this is the margin. One thing that Kelvin has already shared in Figma, say recently, I think this year introducing config, we have all the Boolean properties, text properties, those are new things that actually in the end brings us one step closer to development to connect with the component API. So what you see in Figma in terms of the right panel they can control may actually got a good chance to connect with the developers one way closer, that this is actually also how they configure the component, like a primary button, state dot hover, state dot something, right? So we can also start to look into that because handing over the specifications of a component is actually way more complex than just a screen. Yeah.
And I can also add a bit of it. I think I echo with everything that they say. If you, when in situations that you need to export a specification to the developers, these are some great tools. So at Seek, what we are trying to do is in our design system, we create more like a prototype kind of software. We call it Playroom. Our design system is open source. You can look at it. Just go to search Braid. Braid is the name of our design system. Braid Seek, and you'll be able to find it. So we have a Playroom. It has all the components that designers can basically drag and drop. And it will automatically generate all these code for developers already. So it requires some skills in terms of coding. Obviously, it doesn't do all the job, but it's something that we have developed to make everything faster. So we're actually looking forward to see how do we take it to the mobile approach as well, because right now it's mainly serving web, and our native app design system is still building. So I think hopefully eventually we also get it for apps. So that is really a tool that we help to support, foster the collaboration between designers and developers.
It's called Braid.
Braid, yeah, the hair braid thing, yeah. Maybe I can ask the organizer to send the link so you guys could have a look. Cool. So do you have more questions?
You said you should build stuff in browser.
So which means once you have a design system, like for example, at Seek, we do have everything documented. So in our documentation, we have exactly what Kelvin just talked about. We have we write about what it is. We have code transferred in that way. So when we talked about working in browser, it's really sit together with your developers and build the design in browser. So just talk to the developers and say, hey, I want to have a field components here, and then I would like to insert a button components and maybe an icon. Even the icons will have names, and we systemize it. So they are actually building in front of you rather than you're doing things in Figma and then transfer the file to them or any other design tools. So we kind of encourage people to use Figma maybe even in a lower, in a low-fi perspective. Designers do not need to necessarily draw out everything, but they just have to have a wireframes. And when you go back to the developers, you really work through the UI in the browser. Yeah. All right. All right. Okay, let's continue. So I will just pass it to Theo for the second part.
Thank you, Joanne. Actually, before I jump into my part, just to say hi to everyone, I'm Theo. I'm the head of HSBC Design System, so glad to meet everyone here. Before I jump into my part, I actually want to comment a bit on the tip number one they actually just mentioned around speaking the business language, because I think what Joanne has just mentioned, all the super valid key points that we should push to the business. But sometimes you still feel like us being designer and business are kind of like speaking different language. So we really need to try to push one extra step to speak their language. One kind of example that I have done previously when we are trying to set up the development library for it is to make a business case for it. Okay, we already know all the kind of like value that we can bring by introducing the design system, but what actually is the cost that you saved? Just pick a component, say for example, like a primary button. Maybe that has been used in your organization for 100 times. Ask your developer how long it takes to build a button. Maybe 1 day. Get a cost of an average for a developer in your company, times 100 times. That's the cost they'll save for one button. And that's not even talking about, just one component, right? So by bringing up all these kind of numbers to your business, you then start to speak their language and they start to visualize, what they actually mean in terms of the cost that I save, instead of talking on those values, because they get it, but still it's hard for them to make the actual decision. So actually, I think today we're following a quite good logic that Kelvin started with some fruitful introduction on Design System 101, and Joanne is kind of like introducing all the values that we should bring up of having a design system. And I'm going to get my hands dirty on, okay, how should I deal with the business? So I'll continue with actually we have in the end 4 tips that I want to share with everyone to get business buy-in. So I'll continue with the third one, is to adopt design system in an agile way, push it step by step. So if you're having a problem dealing with a business, that at least means your business may have a certain level of the scale. So one thing that I really want to remind everyone is Rome wasn't built in 1 day. Sometimes for us being designers, we are always very ambitious. We really want to push things to happen in the perfect way. But actually, this is not how business is working. So for the senior leadership, for them to make a decision for the whole organization is actually hard. But if you can allow them to have a certain teams to start the pilot, that will actually easier for them to start with. And actually, in the end, that's also going to benefit you, because if you want to start your design system all the way for your organization in one go, you may probably end up with some teams that is actually not fitting the purpose of the design system. And you are getting all the feedbacks in one go, all of a sudden with some scenarios or expectations that you're not really expecting. So starting small actually helps you to also get all those feedbacks in a digestible bits, so that you can improve your design in a faster way actually. And finally, the way that you can actually work with your business team is that you can set regular evaluation checkpoints. Like, okay, for this year, I start with this ABC team and see how it works. And maybe 1 year later, we see some positive feedbacks. We can then kind of push one level up, and in the end, finally achieve our goal to push your design system for the entire organization. So stay calm, and we can do that. And I think the last tip that I'm going to share, it's around the KPIs. Actually, that's also one of the questions that we receive in the Google form that we collect from everyone. This is also very helpful when we want to really push design system in a bigger business. Setting KPIs is always a good way for us to have some measurement. I think the first one, I'll actually ask everyone here that, is anyone here already using the Figma Enterprise Plan for your organization for design systems? Okay, seems some of us. Okay, not a lot. So actually, this is something that I definitely recommend everyone to use. So Figma, if you're already in the enterprise plan for the Figma software, you actually get this free functionality to really get the real live data of your component usage. Say, for example, this is actually coming from the official website from Figma, and you can actually learn, say, for example, how many times a certain component has been used, how many people has actually detached your component, right? Let's be in a bit of a police to see, oh, okay, you guys have detached that. Actually, there is quite a lot of fruitful data that you can get from here. And from this example, you can actually do some comparison of toolkit A and toolkit B and see what's the adoption rate. I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that one, this is such a powerful tool that you can use this Figma Analytics if you're already on Figma Enterprise Plan. So use that. But to be honest, even if you are not, or maybe you are not even hosting a design system in Figma, you can still try other ways to really get some number to showcase the business. You can have a very quick look into, say, for example, all the sketch files that in the past 1 year, in the past 6 months, the design teams has been working. And then you can start to have the estimation on how your design components and design patterns has been used. And finally, you should highlight these key measures back to your stakeholders to see how the adoption rate is for your design system on design perspective. So that's my kind of recommendation number one, really try to measure the things happening on the design side. And if you are lucky enough that you actually also got the development library already built matching to your design library, that's even better. Work with your developers to really set up some mechanism, maybe within GitHub, within whatever way that works for your company to track the usage of the component. These are some random numbers that I put in, but you get what I mean. Say, for example, for the primary button, in total there are 123 journeys, but the primary button has already been used in 112 of them, right? So these are the numbers that you can actually present back to the business. And remember what I just mentioned, my comment on task tip one is that do your estimation on the cost that you could save. And now you got the real number. That's actually, I believe for every company it will be way better than the estimation that you have done maybe 1 year ago, right? So this is something you can keep getting back to the business, because when business start to invest on you, they're not just pay and go. They're expecting some feedbacks and see how it works and see if there is value for them to keep investing. This is something we should get back regularly and translate your data into the business outcomes so that they'll keep working together. And finally, design system, in my opinion, is always a product. Other than those, how do I call it, like hard KPIs, like the adoption rate, there's also some soft APIs that you should also measure, which is the user experience of your design systems. User is exactly the designers in your company. They are using your design system. And design system is never perfect. You shouldn't be just limiting the usage of some components, right? There's always some contribution back to you. So how do you set up this process? How do they feel about this process? Do they feel actually quite flexible? The scalability is also quite good. If all these kind of things can be measured, you can also share back to your business that not just we are performing good in the adoption rate, we're also having some good user feedback from our core designers, right? So in our company, we basically use Jira Service Desk to raise a new pattern request that we call it. And every time after a request, after our review, right? So we just have a bit of a rating, say, okay, out of 5 stars, how do you feel about this? And also with the Jira Service Desk, you also get quite some data from the backend. So, okay, in the past year, I've got this number of new requests on a certain component. Is this something actually I need to work on? So it's not really flexible enough. So quite a lot of things you can actually measure from the experience side as well. I really hope that with the measurement on all these kind of hard or soft KPIs, that can really help you to bring back to your business and eventually together achieve with the better design system. And I know, Joanne, you have reserved the last one on the reading materials, right?
Yeah, so I just put in some reading materials for everyone to take back after you get the slides, because I think some of you are in different journeys on design systems. We do have like books that talks about how you start to create a design system from scratch. We do have things about how do you do benchmarking your design systems. So hopefully these are the useful materials that you can take back and have a read. These are all basically free except the first book. You will have to buy it, but I think the other two is free. Cool. Any questions?
Just to supplement, we will sharing the slides after this event. So, yeah. So, any questions from the audience first? No. Okay.
Well, first of all, I just want to say this is just fantastic sharing. Thank you so much. I especially love the fact that, oh, sorry.
For Zoom.
Oh, okay. So First of all, thank you so much. This is amazing sharing. Thank you. And I think is just want to comment on it's amazing that you touch on the value of design, because I think especially there's I think a lot of audience here is at the beginning of their career, and I think it is increasingly important that we need to justify the value of design from research, from everything that we do, but talking about the value of design on the topic, design system, probably the most kind of crafty, one of the most crafty topic, is just fantastic. So thank you. My question is actually it's interesting the way the three of you sitting. Crypto.com, in one way, is you can look at it as a very, very fast moving company to relatively a little bit more enterprise, complex, even though you guys are pretty big. So my question for you is, what's the biggest challenge for you in terms of governance of the design system, compared from an industry that is extremely fast to a company is very much, multi-layered, slower?
So let me give you a more like big company, slower pace kind of try not to say something bad about company. My company is great. So I think the biggest challenge that we go through is we do have high adoption rate on design system. We do have a mature design system. People understand it. But there's two things that we're struggling. First is usage. Does people use the right components? Like, we do have design system. People can use it in different ways. They can put it in a really wrong way, which will affect usability. Maybe it's not the right pattern to use. So that actually takes education. What we try to do is, maybe I talked about other questions because it kind of have a similar solutions. The other question is, every change is difficult for human beings, right? Human being doesn't like change. The design system is introduced, I think, approximately like in a good way, like when it covers most of the components, it's like 2-3 years ago. So we do have UX designers and we have visual designers. It's almost like taking away people's job, right? So people will be reacting to it and think that, oh, I do not want to use the design system. So I think all the tips that we create just now, especially talking about design consistency and efficiency, is equally important for people to hear in teams. So what we do is, for all new joiners joining Seek, I have a privilege that I'm also looking after design operations. It's one of the things that we put into our onboarding process. We want to make sure that people understand the values of design, and we understand the values of design system. It shouldn't be contradicting, because I know that a lot of people are asking questions that when you have design system, we don't have any creativity rooms to do any UI design. And I'm just like, it's just the opposite. You get more time to really work on the uniqueness of the product rather than working on the components. So it's more like a shift of mindset you need to help people to understand. The other one is we also want to introduce design reviews. Currently, we only do design reviews in squad level, but in the next quarter, what we're thinking is we want to introduce design review on a UI level. So we do have our design system experts looking into design to see where are the components actually not really used correctly. Because I think I won't blame designers of not really thinking things holistically, because this is how the team was formed. They're working in a more like a vertical within one of the feature or product, rather than looking at other features and product. And in a company size like us, we do have 60 designers. They're all in multiple squads. I can't count how many squads we already have, but it's very typical that they would just look into their own squad. So having a reviews with people is really helping them to first create visibility of what's happening across the entire product. The second thing is, while doing this type of reviews, you can give critiques and educating people in understanding maybe this may not be the problems that I'm solving right now, but they do understand it might be a problem that I will be facing in the future. So creating visibility and also educating people how to use the patterns correctly is also one of our role. Other than that, I feel like documentation is always very important, because it is more like the single source of truth that people will come back and take a look of, like, how do we actually use the systems. So we do continuously invest on improving documentations. Is always a living documents that we tell people. We also set up, we use Slack for internal communication. We set up channels for people to ask for help, no matter it's technical side or design side. So our team is also reacting to these questions. So hopefully, with all these different channels, we're providing a good governance, but it still requires team to come to us in one sense. If they don't realize the problem is pretty hard for us to help them. So we're also doing some things with the leadership level to make sure that everyone do have the skills on handling design system. So actually, it's all effort of the team. Is not only our team. Yeah, so it's just some of the things that we have been doing. Anything you guys want to add?
Maybe I can add something on top of that because I think we are sharing quite some similar challenges. I think in my way of saying that, it's probably the challenge on the balance of flexibility. Of course, maybe some of you are aware of a terminology called atomic design. So you're breaking design system into quite different levels. Of course, you can't go very extremely to the atom level that I just define the colors, typography, and please use wherever you want. Then you basically lose control and there's no need for a design system. But on the other hand, you also don't want, I think it's a bit scary when I talk about this kind of challenge. Should I start? Sure. Should I carry on?
Please continue. Yeah, carry on. We'll fix
Carry
it.
on in a bit romantic mood. So,
Friday.
yeah. Okay, so I'll carry on. And of course, in the other direction, you don't want to get people's hand tied. Hey, you only have to use the button like this way. You can't do it another way. So, how to really achieve this kind of like balance is really a challenge that you need to face, especially when the users of the design system gets, in a larger population. It's actually harder to really thought about that. So, I don't really have a solid answer for everyone. What I can say is that actually right now we are trying to use Figma, see if that can be a way to solve that. Because right now in Figma, there is a privilege for us to publish the library at different levels. You can go either just at the team level or all the way to the organization level. And I know from Figma, that's also in their roadmap that they're also investing to see if we can publish library at the workspace level as well, if you're on enterprise plan, maybe coming out later this year. But in short, by enabling people to own their level of reusable components, that actually enables your design system to go in different layers. Probably at our level, we just need to control all the core components, or I should say universal components, while different teams, different project teams, different platform teams, they can own their platform-specific or project-specific business components. And as long as they're inheriting our core components, using our styles, using our tokens, if, coming from development perspective, that should be fine. And together we form an ecosystem. We are on the way to try this, and not sure if it will work, but I hope it will work. Thanks.
Kevin, do you?
Yeah, I think it's better to give people a chance to ask other questions.
Yeah, we don't have too much time, so yeah, see any more questions? Nick?
So I was just wondering, could you guys give perhaps one example? Actually, I was very interested in the Jira ticketing system where people I guess raise a request to create new component. I was wondering if you could give us some examples of one time where you rejected a request and one time you actually accepted a new component, and what are some of the I guess high-level justifications for these cases?
Yeah, sure, happy to. So the Jira ways of working has actually been set up for quite a long time because previously, before we move on to Figma, we used Sketch. And you know how painful that can be, right? So it's really setting up for tracking the progress of the conversation for the review, especially, in bigger companies like us. It's not just designers involving, in the reality. It's also some business owners, product designers, product managers. They also want to jump into and see what's the overall progress of it. So that's why we set up this Jira service desk so that we can track all the progress. According to our data, I think basically 1/3 of the requests will be rejected. And that usually comes from quite different reasons. One of the biggest reasons is actually the solution can actually be used by any existing components already. You are probably creating something that's not really needed at a universal level for now. So actually, there's some alternative to really make that happen. So that's usually the reason why we reject some of the requests. And but other than that, most of the requests are actually quite good, quite outstanding. They are more kind of like creating a variation on top of the component they already have. Say for example, actually the screen that I just used, maybe I can actually go back to this one. This is a very abstract example, right? Originally you just have a button, but after a year you found out that actually designers may need a button with the icon, designers may need a button in the loading state, right? So you just rely on this kind of methodology. People raise a request and you review together. So most of the requests that we receive day to day are all this kind of configuration or variant requests. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Mind if I do a follow-up question on just that note?
Yep.
Yeah, on that note of like, so you mentioned that lots of people actually making a lot of good requests of, you know, enriching the design system, making more variants. How do you know that you're being over generous about that? How do you know that? Is it like a judgment call? How do you know that, okay, this should have been used by or replaced by some existing components? How do you know that it is the right thing to do to make this a new thing and welcome that to the library?
Good point. So when we ask people to raise a request, they will not just create that exact component. I'll ask them to also share a bit of a context on where you are expecting to use this component. Now, of course, they'll come from their journey. So you already see 2 to 3 use cases already, right? So that's where you can start to consider. At the same time, we also have should I call it a forum. Twice in a week, we call Design System Lab. Oh, great. Good things comes. So Design System Lab. Yeah, so we have a platform called Design System Lab where designers can actually join and review together on some recent requests. And that's where designers coming from other teams can, oh, you know, actually recently I also have the same request. So that's also where we can help to, you know, collect a bit feedback from everyone else. Again, making this product, I mean, design system as a product more collaborative. It's not just you being the governing body. It's, oh, I need this, I want that, you can't do that. So that's how we work. Yep.
I think I can also add one note. So regarding on this question, we also reject a lot of requests coming in because we do have a rule of thumb that we want to keep our design system as lean as possible because it should be only having the most important ingredients in the design system rather than having everything, right? So one of the most common being asked question is they want to make the header of the website to become a system component. So first, a header is really complex. If you look into atomic level, it is way, like, I think it's in a modular level. It's not really the atoms because there are a lot of different things like contributed to the headers. How we usually reject is we will go back to designers or the requested and telling them that it's actually you're creating a lot of, we may be blocking you. First, the system is quite small. The system team, we don't have a lot of people. So as a header, it will frequently going through different changes, right? Like sometimes you want to prioritize certain things on the header. Sometimes it's you might want to take things away. So we kind of group it more like a product decisions that they want to make. They might want to also run user testing. So we do not want our team to become a blocker. Because in times that we are receiving a lot of different requests, we are solving people's problem, we are guiding people using design system. The remaining time to really maintain a system is not a lot. And with a really like humble team of like 3-4 people working with it, within it, including a developer, we won't be able to react to all these changes so quickly. So one of the way that we going to push back is saying that if this is a component that is complex and it will evolve in time, or it will evolve very quickly, a lot of stakeholders watching a certain components, we tend not to put it into design system as well. Because it would just block you guys from doing any testing that you want to, because all these requests will come back to design system team, and we need to prioritize this work for you, which it doesn't reach any mutual like benefits at the end.
So you allow it to move forward, but it doesn't get.
Yeah, we also have some sort of like design system lab. We call it Metropolis. So it is an area where we try to build things by like combining certain design components into one. But distributed teams have full control in making changes in those patterns. Yeah, because we feel like it's actually a better way to give the flexibility back to the teams whenever they need certain things really quickly. They don't depend on us on shipping certain changes.
Okay. I guess we also have to take a look at the Slido questions. Yeah. So I think previously what we have collected also come from some designers coming from smaller team or team of one. And I think one of the questions they ask is how to build a minimum viable system, design system. Like, what is your definition of a minimum viable design system, or how to create one? Should because some of the suggestion is like, should they replicate an existing one or build one from scratch, or building from like existing components that they have created? So how would you approach this?
Yeah, I think first of all, like what's the MVP of a design system? It depends really on the team. You could have a product where it's just one page, then the design system would look very, very different compared to a design system for, I don't know, a product that can have 15 flows of multiple pages. And also it depends on how big your team is again. So early on, I mentioned like in a design team of one, usually it's the person's brain who is the design system. So that could be the MVP. And when you have more people, people involved in the design process, then documenting this system, the need of documenting this system would increase, because then you can't rely on one person's brain. Then in that case, that would be the MVP. I guess speaking of the topic of whether if you're starting out, you should use something that's out there, or if you should build something on your own. My experience is that it's really great to reuse the existing system out there if and only if you're familiar with those things, because these design systems out there, they tend to build to cater to a wide variety of needs. So it could mean building for products that can have a lot of functionality. So with that, then the design system would be very complex. You would have a list of all components. You will have a very, very complex grid as well. And in these cases, especially for early on products where you're just starting out, for me, I tend to go to reference those systems, but then I build my own, because then you can have better control over the design system that you're building. And in specific, for example, I can create only components that I need at that time. And only at that time when I need it, I create it, instead of having a list of like 20 components that I might not use in the near future. That can help with communication as well, because then the design system is in sync with the product team, and it's in sync with the actual design that's out there. Then you can see kind of them design system and also the product grow together. So to me, that's the MVP.
Cool. Any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, so specific to a company where you are working with different projects, not like an in-house designer. So you normally tend to like reuse stuff. So what differentiates design system from any other company? And how would you recommend to like create a good design system for all the companies that you are working with?
I think I'll answer the first question first. How is your design system different from any other design system, right? So interestingly, last Wednesday, there is another design system talk in Australia. I joined that, and they're also talking about maybe in 10 years, will all the design system actually become just one design system and everyone just use that? Well, in that conversation, the speaker's opinion is no, and I hold the same kind of thinking. I think design system, again, I keep saying that word, design system is a product. As long as it's a product, it has its own users. So say, for example, what Kelvin just mentioned, if I would summarize in Cantonese slang, it's 睇餸食飯, right? So different company has different uniqueness of that. So say, for example, our company, it's kind of like a banking industry. So you also need to pay attention to, say, for example, the tone of voice. I mean, the visual tone of voice, because when people use traditional bank, you also want to keep it relatively standard. While, say, for example, PayMe, it's more, age-wise younger. So the visual tone of voice is also having some, round corners. So overall, it feels like that. So you start to pay attention more of this, and that's the bits and bits like that. It's what makes a design system different from each other. And not to mention some special industries, they may also have some special platform they need to cover, right? So again, your designer, your industry defines what your design system is, and that's what makes us different. Yep. I'm not sure.
100% agree.
Oh, thank you.
Just quick note on that as well. I think that the question that you have can also translate to whether all apps should look the same. And I think that the answer is no. And the reason behind that is because of the context that we're designing in. For example, when you're in fintech, you tend to have a lot of regulation. And with regulation, right, your design would look, for example, more dense and chunky because you have to explain to someone on a certain action very clearly before they proceed. And take another example, a simple call to action. In a trading app, a call to action would look super small because you have to see a list of other different information on the screen. But then compared to another, I don't know, like fitness app, it's less information heavy. And in those cases, then the call to action could look very different. So I think with that, then, because the product looks different, then this design system should be structured and should look very different as well. And on top of that, I think at the end depends on people as well. I think there is not one right way to build a system, and therefore, like design in general, it comes to taste of the designer, of that group of designer, which could be impacted by culture, which could be impacted by the knowledge that you have in the team. So even if we're building the design system for a same product, it could look very different depending on which team you're in. Yeah, so that's it.
Okay, maybe a few more questions from Slido. Maybe we can each of you can answer. I'll ask multiple questions and we can go very quickly. I think one of the voted question is how do you measure the success of your own work? On top of those KPI that Phil has mentioned. And also another questions would be any story to share about have you guys decide whether to break a design system or not?
Okay.
I'll be very quick because I think I already shared quite some KPIs.
KPI. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what is the measurement of the success? I think scalability is definitely one of them. Design system, again, keep saying it's a product used by users. So how can you really utilize this tool to design your journey in the actual scenario without breaking it, but at the same time offering enough weapons to really build that? It's actually quite important. So try every possible way to get this measured. That would be my recommendation for that. I'm not sure if you will.
Yeah, I think I can talk about when are we going to break up. It's not really breaking design system. Actually, we're going through this right now. So at Seek, we're also looking into improving our visual language. So there are certain things that after acquisitions, we start to introduce Seek brand in Asia. And we also trying to look into how we can improve the current branding. And it definitely would relate to how we're going to change the design system. So it is more in terms of business need, sometimes you will have to react to trends. Sometimes you will have to make certain changes in your visual language. This is a time that you will be maybe changing the design system, not really breaking it, because I think the fundamental is still there. You have set up all these specs, maybe you're doing some sort of color change, maybe you're adding your signature moments into your design system by having some sort of motions. It's always improving the design system rather than I would see it as a breaking it. If you have set it up right, likely you don't have to break it. Unless there is a big change in terms of user behavior or there are new device set up, the design system have to react to it, have to react to the changes. But many times, I believe that design system is always a living document. It's never set in stone. You will always be updating it. You want your brand to look modern, right? So yeah, I won't see it more like break, but it's more like an evolvement.
In terms of KPI, I have two. So first is really the usage of the design system, the number of people who are using it, and the occurrence where people use it. That's the first KPI for me. And then the second would be how happy my colleagues is working with the design system. It could be a little, like, it's not numbers and whatsoever, but I talk to people, to our designers, and see if they're happy. If they're happy, then that's my KPI. And then in terms of breaking design system, I think I don't have, so it breaks every day, and I don't have to break it. People will break it for me, and I think our job as product designers working in design system is really to help sustain that design system, to grow it when it is breaking because of a new use case, or because things are not usable in some ways.
Yeah, breaking is also part of the evolving, the part of a process. I guess, like, any final questions before we, okay, two more. Let's combine it together and like have a.
I'm just wondering, do you have any experience about about the design handoff to developers, like how designers educate the developer about the system, and the other way around, how developer would demand certain things from design system to help them to do the development?
And I actually have two questions. First, the first one is you mentioned about the designer should know about how voiceover works, right? How do you have any resources or things that help designers? Because designers, we might not be fully in touch with the technology, accessibility technology, right? Is there any resources that we can look up to learn more about accessibility when we design systems? And then the second one is a lot of, there are over-the-counter design systems like Untitled UI and something that you can buy, right? And when is the time that you will know that you have to transition from like a over-the-counter design system to one that is bespoke, that is made by your own business?
Okay, first, to answer your question about resource, about learning accessibility. First is, there's a link I put in the slide called A11Y. It's an initiative about all things about accessibility, and in that website, they listed a lot of different things about color contrast, about assistive technologies. So that's one resources. And then the second, and I think that's a more important one, and is that if you're designing for mobile, especially for iOS, take a look at the human interface guideline from Apple. I think it's super great in terms of accessibility. In there, they cover not only about the tech, but also in general, designing for inclusion. Things like designing for culture awareness, stuff like that. You can find a lot of resources there. And then
Handoff, like from.
Oh, handoff. I think for handoff, you mentioned about like how do we educate developers? And to me, in fact, sometimes the developers educate me on how to design the design system, because I think this design system thing is not only about design, much not like design, but actually it's a bridge between design and also code. And therefore, when we design the design system, we need to make sure we understand how the actual implementation is working. Again, take the example of a grid. In the design system, you should cater to the technology that we're using, and therefore design a grid that is behaving the same way as the tech did. So in that, I think it's a mutual education process. It's not like me, the designer, telling the developer what to do. I don't see it that way. It's a collaborative process.
Yeah, I think I actually echo you because I learn a lot from the developers instead. Because many times when we do design, when we are more like a junior designer, we only think of the state that we see, right? There are so many states. For example, like buttons, or when you're doing form design, there are states like error states. There are states that maybe the page gets stagnant. These are the things that actually developers telling us and think about, like, how do we actually tackle these states? So I always feel like educations or is more like knowledge sharing is mutual. It's not only from designers to engineers. Sometimes you will learn a lot from engineers as well.
Thank you. I'll just add on the accessibility question. I think the best tool is your iPhone. So actually, there's quite a lot of accessibility controls, or I should say accessibility shortcuts that you can actually enable from your control center. So for example, I always have my text size dynamic in my control center. So every time when I'm testing for an app, I can just go all the way to 300% and turn it down. So it's set it dynamically. Another thing when you talk about voiceover is, first of all, go to Apple's official website, learn how to exit the voiceover mode, and then cover your eyes, turn that on, and imagine yourself being someone in that need. And there's no better way for you to experience yourself. And then you will start to learn why is that important, and that's simply it. Yep.
Okay, any final questions? If no, we can go to. We should have lucky draw, right, Michelle? Oh. What? You do it after? Yeah. Oh, let me finish the slide first. We'll have lucky draw later. So a bit more information and promotion for our friends of Figma. We are on Discord and LinkedIn. Please feel free to join you if you haven't followed us yet. And we are very active on Discord as well. We have tons of activities going on. And also we are also planning ahead, like our September schedule. We have started the design challenge, which is a new initiative. We are doing it monthly. And also on 15th of September, we have our monthly design inspiration. Also on Saturday, 17th, we also have our side project Saturday. So we bring all of our side projects together and design together. And on the last week of September, we will also have our FigJam Friday. So stay tuned. On all our events, we will post it on Discord and also on LinkedIn.